Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this so this session is about, well, it is an introduction to strategic messaging. So it's based on a sort of strategic messaging course on Resistance School by Annette Shenko-Osorio. So in the follow-up email, we'll like have the link on there if you want to take it, and that will go into like a lot more depth than this course. But I think this will be like serve as like a good sort of primer to the subject. Okay, so there's some messaging that we have, just sort of photos from actions, and sorry, I'm hearing like strange echo from somewhere. Is anyone else hearing it?
Sorry, just maybe, yeah, if everyone could make sure that they're on mute.
Cool. I think that's better. Thank you very much. Okay, yeah. So we have like a bunch of essentially words over here, right? But these are just messages that people have put on placards or banners or on a boat at actions. These so messaging essentially serves as like the front end of our campaigns, where we say front end, we mean like what the wider public will see when they when they look at our words. So yeah. Now, if we take like sort of like a general profile of the public and sort of split them up into categories of like how much they support a cause, like we can split them up into active supporters, passive supporters, persuadables, passive opposition, and active opposition. In like most societies, most people will be persuadable, but you will get some scenarios where, like, just depending on society itself and depending on the cause, the sort of it might be skewed more to like active opposition. So on the scale, we have like the active supporter here. The active supporter will embody the message, right? So they'll be the ones holding up the sort of the placards or the banners or whatever, embodying our message and just sort of letting the world see it. We then have our passive supporters who sort of like agree with us, but yeah, they've got other things going on, but they are sort of tempted to, become active supporters. We then have persuadables. So strategic messaging is primarily targeted towards persuading the persuadables, right? So persuadable, so I have here like, but, so they'll think about it and they'll be receptive to it, like they'll perceive the message, but, they might just say but and just sort of carry on with their lives, just go about their business. We then have our passive opposition, who might respond with, what is this rubbish when they see our words, and then we'll have our active opposition who'll say nope, and just not be receptive to our messaging at all. So how, through messaging, can we empower our active supporters, mobilize our passive supporters, but most importantly, persuade the persuadables, which is one of sort of the key goals of strategic messaging. So to start off, we're just going to have like a quick primer on stories and frames. So I think it's in like cognitive linguistics. The theory that's widely accepted is that humans are the storytelling animal, and we form our basis, sort of our understanding of reality on stories that sort of we experience and that we're told. And we can sort of trace it back to like a really long time ago when humans were first like doing cave paintings, and then also like religious text, which like probably formed like a large part of like our moral basis and our ethical basis at the time. But then we have actual stories as well, which parents tell to children sometimes, and in school you might have heard a lot of stories as well, might have told a lot of stories to each other, and stories were a big part of our childhood. Not only that, we also sort of learned more logical things through stories as well, where like, for example, like maths, like when I learned maths, and I think like it's quite common, rather than sort of expecting the child to figure out by themselves what 2 + 2 is, they probably say something like Billy goes to the shop. He has 5 sweets. He then gives 2 of his sweets to Emma. How many sweets does he have left? So formed sort of an understanding from a story which formed sort of, a part of their logic. Like we then grew maybe a little bit older and sort of started exchanging like spicy stories through gossip and stuff. In like general conversation, we invite people to share their stories. So we say, so how was your day? What did you get up to over the summer? And then to the modern day, where on Instagram, we can make stories of a cat shooting lasers out of its eye, and people are interested in watching them. So the basic thing is that humans are the storytelling animal. Stories are all around us and they form sort of the basis of our reality. We move on to frames. So a frame is sort of technically a schema that the brain uses to process information. They're made of stories. So it might seem a bit abstract now, but as we move on, we'll sort of, I hope it'll like solidify the concept a bit. So we have a bunch of stories. These stories create the person's frame. So it's not like a frame, like a structure, it's a frame like a photo frame. And inside that frame, there's content, and that forms like a schema or like a data model or just some sort of interpretive process which defines how the person or the person's frame understands reality. So we're going to move on to context. So I think like a really sort of much easier way to understand frames might be context. So you can use the terms frames and context like quite interchangeably. So so when I say frames, think of context, and when I say context, think of frames. So one of the key like things about in strategic messaging is to sort of, we take our messaging, we look at the person's frame, and then we adapt our messaging to the person's frame, so that sort of they take the message in more, and rather than just sort of not give it a second look. This is where facts come in, right? So facts are important, right, because they sort of define our reality in quite an objective manner. And if you sort of do outreach or messaging by just sort of saying facts like something has increased by X% over the last Y years, which has caused such a problem, that fact, like, unless it's part of sort of their context, a part of their everyday life, a part of their job, or a part of something they're actually really interested in, that fact will only sort of exist when they perceive it, right? But when they're engaged in something else, it'll go away. Like that fact won't really matter anymore to them. So it's like when you read like a boring news headline, right? So you might be sort of flicking through the news, and you'll have this sort of really fact-based headline, and at the time you'll acknowledge the fact, but you'll sort of it'll sort of drown out like the moment you stop looking at it. And this is where the saying comes from, that facts bounce off frames. So there's a fact, there it is, it's in the here and now, but then it bounces off, it's no longer there. The other thing that we need to take into account is regarding context is that people aren't receptive to things outside of their frame. So if it's something completely outside of the frame, the brain just won't sort of interpret it. Like it won't be a part of like their immediate reality. Might acknowledge its existence, but it won't like form a significant element of their reality, and definitely not significant enough for them to sort of essentially care about it. So same thing, frames, context, frames. Oh yeah, sorry, and I forgot to mention also. So when we're looking at people's frames, so remember that frames are made of stories, right? we can sort of generalize frames just depending on people's locations, like the time it is. So whatever narrative is persistent, like in their region at this point in time, the culture, the religion, sort of many things that we can sort of generalize based on certain things, that we can say that their frame is likely to be like this, right? And this sort of applies more to like mass messaging rather than sort of individualistic one-on-one messaging. The other thing is that people actually have multiple frames and sometimes even conflicting frames. And at any given moment, one of them will be in the foreground and the others will be in the background, right? So whilst I may have multiple frames, so I might have like a social frame, a work frame. So one probably acts very different, like in a pub with their friends than they do at work, and they probably think very differently as well. They'll have like many more frames as well. So yeah, many more frames, but yeah, this is obviously like quite a simplistic example. And people, they toggle between different frames, right? So when they toggle into a frame, that particular frame will come into the foreground and the rest will be in the background. So if I'm in a Zoom social and not at work, I'll be toggled into my social frame, and my work frame and all the other frames will be in the background. So if we then sort of interchange frames with context, maybe it's like easy to understand that way, where I'll be toggled into a social context rather than a work context. Now, one of the sort of things, sort of the main sort of aspects of strategic messaging is to toggle people into a frame that can relate to our messaging and that can relate to our cause, and then they'll be sort of more receptive of it. So yeah, so we want to toggle people into this frame, something resembling our frame. So if we're like Animal Rebellion, it might be a climate change frame, but primarily it'll probably be a frame based on compassion or ethics or something like that. Definitely not the work frame for the mass public. So to start off, we're going to look at the words, right? So the words in our messaging have the power to toggle people into the frame or the context that they need to be in to be receptive to our messaging. So words mean things, many things. Now, you might have heard the saying, a picture speaks 1,000 words, but also words speak 1,000 words also. So words mean things, including their associations. And this is sort of probably the most important element of words, is that when we are presented with a word or a set of words, our brain, depending on our frame, will trigger and create loads of associations based on sort of what's in our frame or what's in our context. So here we have the word llama. So this can be in text, it can be the sound of the word llama, or it could be sort of any form in any media of the word llama. It'll probably trigger like an image of a llama, and then it'll trigger its associations. So we have fluffy, cute, but then also if we're looking at it from like what I imagine most of our frames are, we'll have something like animals. Animals are sentient. Animals are alive. Animals are therefore intelligent. And therefore animals want to live, right? So this is our frame and the associations that our frames evoke from the word llama. Then if we then move on to maybe another phrase, animal agriculture, from an animal justice frame. So kind of an easy way to do this is to like sort of deconstruct the word and say, okay, I'll take animal, then I'll take agriculture as well. So animals, we found out in the last slide, want to live. Agriculture, something, somewhere down the line will we'll have sort of the association that says exploitation, where animals are exploited in animal agriculture. So this is in our frame or our context, the animal justice context. Let's take another word. So here we have the word livestock. Now, this is probably not a word we'll ever use in any of our messaging. And this would probably be why. So when we say the word livestock, so we have the image of livestock, we deconstruct the word to live and stock. And if we look at the associations that one might sort of experience with the word stock, so we have stock, inventory, commodity, ultimately something business related, like like profit or something like that. So it's quite clear that the word livestock belongs to a business frame, right? So that's not a frame that we ever really want to evoke, because it'll sort of lead to like these associations. So yeah, this is what I sort of believe to be like Animal Rebellion's aim in what we're trying to do. So we're sort of trying to unify like an animal justice frame with a climate justice frame, just so that we can sort of build in these associations that we saw before with animal agriculture from an animal justice frame into sort of the climate change message. So here we have like the unification of agriculture, and in the climate change frame, agriculture will probably sort of evoke the associations of deforestation, emissions, and climate emergency, but then also animals that want to live. Yeah, that was words, but fundamentally, like everything in messaging are words, including metaphors. So we're going to talk about something called conceptual metaphors, which are sort of different to like I think they're different to like your everyday sort of metaphors. So that happens to be word also. So a conceptual metaphor is understanding an idea in terms of another, right? Now the thing is that with these types of metaphors, we use them in our everyday language almost without realizing, or almost sort of like they're like second nature. So for example, we have, I spent a lot of time making this presentation and I feel like my life is going in the wrong direction. I think I might have been like in a bit of a bad mood when I was making this slide, but yeah, here it is. So I could have said it took me quite a while to make this presentation, but I said I spent a lot of time to make this presentation. And what I did there was I used a conceptual metaphor here, right? Where I didn't really actually spend any money. I just associated the time I spent in terms of money, right? And think about like sort of the difference in the experience and what you feel when someone when you read that, or when someone says that, right? So if I said, yep, I spent a lot of time making this presentation, the word spent signifies that I spent something on it, I lost something for this, and it's sort of not as like encouraging or not as inspiring as something that it could be like rephrased into. And then another one is that as I just mentioned, I feel like my life is going in the wrong direction. Life doesn't actually move in a particular direction. We do move in like forward in time, but that's not really like a direction as such. But what we're doing here is we have a conceptual metaphor here, and we're saying that it's life in terms of a journey. So in your messaging, you don't really need to sort of analyze it in this way. The main thing is that what you think about like what you experience and how do you feel when that sort of metaphor, that conceptual metaphor, is used in that statement. That's like a good way to gauge whether the message is going to be effective or not. And once you've sort of figured out how you feel with that, then ask is this how I want the audience to feel, right? And if the answer is no, then no. But if the answer is yes, then yeah, that's cool. So we can have like some other sort of more like relevant examples. So like smash speciesism, for example, where smash is a metaphor because you can't physically smash speciesism. So like, so think about like, what does that, so what energy does that statement give you? Like smash is sort of, triumphant, or even sort of, it's not very calm. It's the opposite of calm, isn't it? But yeah, but I guess that's like, sort of the message just portrayed in like an inspirational manner. And we also have another example like animal agriculture will fall, where fall is the conceptual metaphor, right? We don't want animal agriculture to actually physically fall down, right? We want it to stop, right? But sort of the energy we're giving off is sort of more epic than that, with that is going to fall, it's going to collapse. So Annette Shenko-Osorio, who's sort of like a strategic messaging expert, identified something like maybe a mistake in like a lot of people's messaging, where the word gap or disparity or divide is used. And Annette sort of said that this is problematic because if we imagine a gap or a divide, right, it sort of implies that two separate systems exist when they're actually a part of the same system, and that sort of separates, the problem. So if we had like, yeah, the example we have here, the global north-south divide, the feeling that people might get, especially the persuadables, would be that there's an actual physical divide between the north and south. And if you're in sort of the global north, the issues of the global south are actually separate to you. We have some stuff in the chat. Yeah, Heidi asked if you can name, yeah, it's Annette Shenko-Osorio. So I'll send it in the follow-up email.
I'll type in the chat if you want.
Cool, great, thank you. Yeah, so the word gap, disparity, or divide sort of, yeah, implies that there's two separate systems when in fact there's like only one global economy, right? And it sort of takes away the accountability of the participants within the global economy on how they're sort of detrimenting the global south. So if we have someone like a persuadable, someone in the middle, who's perceiving this message, the first reaction might be, well, it's not my problem. I'm on this side and we're separate, right? Without sort of acknowledging that it's a part of like a wider system, but the same system. So another good way to sort of phrase it would be like the system is off balance. So rather than there's a divide or a gap, something like off balance, where like the system is sort of one, but within that system there's an imbalance, right? So this is a common mistake that like a lot of like leftist like social change movements do. If you ever worked in like a corporate environment, you might have experienced this, where so hedging is words that sort of take away your own accountability and risk, right? So it's something like, I'm trying to get it done, or we're trying to achieve this. So the way around this, so the problem here is that if we have our persuadables, our middle, the people who are trying to toggle into sort of our frame, they've been fed stories like pretty much all their life about how like winning is good and things like that. And so when they see sort of hedge statements like we are trying to achieve something, they're not really convinced. And some might be sympathetic. Your passive supporters and your active supporters will definitely be sympathetic because they know the struggle. But in general, sort of on a wider scale, people have been fed stories that organizations that actually get things done are good, so they won't really sort of be convinced. So yeah, so and it's quite an easy way. There's quite an easy way to work around it, where it's kind of just like a delete and replace. So if we have this statement here, so we are trying to achieve something, delete the are trying to and just replace it with whatever should be there. So here we have we will achieve something, right? Now you might sort of think that like, hang on, we're promising a lot here and we might not achieve it and stuff like that, but fundamentally I think we should just take the mindset that yeah, we will achieve it, and it'll empower us as well in a way. So you know, it's not yeah, it's sort of a change in mindset. Another one is we are working to hold the government accountable for climate change. So it's kind of like, yeah, we're trying to hold them accountable. You know, we're trying to get there. But delete, we are working to, and change to are holding, and we are holding the government accountable for climate change. And that just hits a lot harder, makes it's more inspiring, and yeah, and people just sort of believe in you more, because like they kind of might question like, does this firm or does this person really believe in themselves, or you know, and you know, so they sort of, you know, think in that way. And yeah, so like another example is like yeah, maybe when you're young and maybe you're doing your homework and it's probably bedtime and your parents might be like what are you doing? And if you say I'm trying to finish my homework or I'm striving to finish my homework, right, it might sort of set like an impression to your parents that you don't want them to think like, oh, are they struggling in school? Should we get them tuitioning or something? But if you say I'm finishing my homework, then you know, I'm finishing it. Don't worry, mom, dad, I'm finishing my homework. Everything's cool. I'm just gonna finish it. So yeah, that's the kind of sort of, yeah, the mindset that you want to sort of project, and you can do that by not hedging ever. That being said, like if it's like sort of internal communications or communications sort of like within your base, and it's obviously better to be completely honest and people sort of will understand. So it's just for like outward mass messaging. That's when you want to sort of yeah, not hedge and convince people and inspire people. Okay, cool. Would you say Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech would be hedging? That's a really good question. I don't know, Holly or anyone, do you know, like I did read about this, but I wouldn't, yeah, consider that as hedging. I just sort of consider that as like a sort of inspirational statement in a way. Yes, visioning, that's it. So it's like a hope-based statement of a vision of the future. So yeah, great question there. Okay, so yeah, so we've sort of gone through like a primer on these things. We do have about 25 minutes left. So what you can do is you can take these things, the associations that certain words trigger, what frame that might put, that the frame that those words might put someone in, and hedging and the metaphors, and then we can rephrase our statements to sort of do what we want them to do. And what we want them to do is toggle into a frame that works with us, and that'll persuade them, and you know, that'll mobilize, empower, and you know, persuade the persuadables. So we're going to do a quick-ish group exercise now. So we're going to go to breakout rooms, and we're going to reframe this statement. So the statement is, we are striving to decrease the wage gap between male and female workers. So think about, so I've kind of like given some clues, yeah, with the underlining. I'm going to go into our breakout rooms and think about hedging and think about the metaphors as well, and also think about the associations and what we've got someone, and sort of what frame that those associations will evoke. So your audience will be maybe a sort of, yeah, someone with a job, a female identity who's like at work and thinking, I think Steve might be, yeah, getting paid a little bit more than I am, but will still sort of carry on in life, go home, yeah, has kids to look after, and things like that. So that's your audience. So we're just going to put you into some breakout rooms. Stop sharing. So yeah, 28. Well, okay. Let's do. Okay. Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. So just gonna share my screen again. Okay, so let's yeah. Oh, I have to exit the presentation. All right, let's go through yeah, what every group came up with. So does someone from group one want to go, and I'll type in the statement.
I guess I can go. So we came up with, well, we kind of worked around a bit, and I feel like we could have had more discussion. But the last one we had was, we are building a world where your gender doesn't determine your pay.
Sorry, slow computer. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Anyone from group two?
Yeah, we have, we will achieve equal pay for all workers.
Awesome. All workers. Cool. Group three, anyone?
I'm not sure. Am I group three? I think I might be.
We're group three, Gordy.
That's okay. I should pay more attention, shouldn't I? We've gone with, we are restructuring the wage imbalance between employees.
Sorry, my spelling's not up to scratch today. The wage imbalance between employees. Awesome, cool. Group four.
We have, we will achieve full wage equality for all women.
Cool. Amazing. Thank you. Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, really great stuff. Yeah, love all of them. But maybe, yeah, so if we just sort of yeah, we'll go through each one. So we're building a world where your gender doesn't determine your pay. And we will achieve equal pay for all workers. We are restructuring the wage imbalance between employees, and we will achieve full wage equality for all women. Yeah, all like, yeah, really good ones. But so yeah, these are sort of much more sort of relevant, much more contextualized messages that are sort of way more likely, I think, to sort of reach yeah, the people who are interested in the topic and persuade them. So yeah, awesome. If I just go back then to the previous slide. So yeah, so we have striving, which is the hedge, right? So we're striving, we're trying. We have the wage gap, so similar to the example that we went through about the north-south divide. And then we have workers as well. So sometimes, like, think about the term workers, employees. Yeah, it's a very businessy word, right? So, but yeah, but still, it's not super businessy, but yeah, that one sort of can be expanded to, well, recontextualized to like people working every day to earn a living to support their families or something like that. But yeah, so yeah, really good stuff. Yeah, thank you, everyone. That concludes the presentation. And so on Mattermost, if you're on Mattermost, we have a messaging request channel. So if you need any help with messaging from our team, yeah, please join that channel. So it's on Global Mattermost, and the channel is called Messaging Requests. And yeah, so any help or support that you might need is on there. I'll put the link for the channel as well in the follow-up email. So yeah, and thank you very much, everyone. Anyone have any questions? If you want to stick around, like, for some discussion, yeah, feel free to.
Thank you, Jan. That was really good.
Thanks.
You.
Thank you. Question from Tracy?
Yeah, I do have a question, if you don't mind. I was thinking when you were showing us that spectrum of active support on through to active opposition and talking about, we're sending our message at one end. When you're looking at a population that has a very low awareness to start with of animal rebellion, how do you know who are your active supporters, your passive supporters, and your persuadables? How do you know who makes up these groups?
Yeah, good question. Someone from strategy know by any chance, or?
Yeah, I can jump in, or Liz, if you want to jump in. So there's an activity that is a really good activity to do, which is called a spectrum of allies. And yeah, it's basically like this whole spectrum. And basically what you do in that activity is the first thing you do is you list everyone you can think of who is vaguely involved in the topic that you're talking about. So if we're thinking about, yeah, like plant-based food system, you'll just list everyone you can think of. So vegan groups, plant-based restaurants, animal farmers, kind of, go through and just brainstorm until you have this massive list, and don't even like worry first off thinking about, well, where do they all fit in? And then from there, when you have this big list, you can then start like sorting through. And a lot of the time, especially when you're starting out, like your active supporters may just be this group of 5 people in this room. And that's, completely that's a point to start from. But I think what we often find when we do that big list is that we have a lot more passive supporters than we might think. So for example, with Animal Rebellion, like a big kind of group that for a long time, like when we started, we didn't really tap into as much as we could have, was like vegans and just animal justice activists. Because, when it started, there was a bit of a tension between Animal Rebellion and those kind of groups. And then down the line, we realized that when we're doing collaboration with them and actually like joining in rather than and like kind of doing like collaborative actions and kind of having dialogue, these are people who are really like aligned with us and everything. And Animal Rebellion is actually formed for like the 99.9% of like animal justice activists who are also doing other work outside and stuff. So we realized that that's a massive pool of people who might not understand fully the message, but they really do actually support us on that, on like the fundamental. They might just not realize that they support us yet. So I think like a good thing, sometimes the word supporters can get a bit confusing because we think like, oh, well, passive supporters must already be supporting us, just not doing anything about it. But like, I think a lot of the time passive supporters don't know they support us yet. So if we're thinking of like the animal, like welfare rights question in general, passive supporters are animal lovers who, send donations to kind of your big NGOs, but don't think about kind of, they're not vegan, they're not vegetarian, but they care. So they're still passive supporters because they fundamentally agree with our message, even if they're not taking action. So I think, yeah, like my biggest recommendation was like just doing that big list first and then sorting it in and moving away from like that thinking of supporting as being actually right now supporting and thinking that they actually agree with us. They just don't know yet that they agree with us because they have associations and ideas about us that we want to kind of disrupt and break those myths they have about us that they're not actually supportive of us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very helpful, I think. Thanks.
Gordy?
I guess this goes on from the question Tracy was asking. Back when we had like, you know, the words like the llama or animal agriculture and the word associations, obviously different groups of people are going to have different associations, like the ones you put for the example very much based around what our group of people would be associating, but and I get the whole difference between livestock, etc., because that indicates a different type of thing. But when you do mention something like animal agriculture, some people wouldn't necessarily directly link to oppression, etc., etc. So I'm guessing my question would be: to reach those people, do we use intermediate words to pull them into the whole idea, or do we just keep using the or do we just hope that through having the message, you know, trickled into their consciousness, then they're aligned themselves? I don't know if I made that question actually all that easy.
Yeah, I think it's quite a tough question, but like it's a very very important one. I think then, like, if you can sort of unpack animal agriculture, the word animal agriculture or the term, like in such a way that it does like evoke sort of compassion in a way. So similar with like the term workers that we sort of saw earlier in that statement. If you unpack what the animals are in that context, right? So you can say, you know, it's quite hard to think of it on the spot, but like sentient animals or intelligent animals, just depending on the frame, you know, where some people might appreciate intelligence or whatever, exploited for the sake of farming and profit, you know, something like that, to sort of contextualize the message more, where someone might sort of just think of animal agriculture as business or as, you know, a source of food. So so there's various ways to do it, I think.
So it's when we're using those type of words to then keep it in a context that is the context that we want to portray to them. I'm guessing absolutely. That makes perfect sense.
So any more questions or anything, or just any random discussion is fine as well. Holly?
I was just going to say, before everyone kind of leaves or we kind of wrap up, so this workshop is part of like the messaging team is doing like kind of workshops every week on different topics. So next Thursday at the same time, so at 6, there'll be a workshop on how we're represented in the media and how that's changing as well. So yeah, if you're kind of interested in like the messaging and learning more and kind of developing that as well, come along. We'll be having them every week. I think if you could, Jam can put a link to the next training in the chat. Sorry, in the follow-up email.
Cool. And then if you want to sort of go into more depth, there's the strategic messaging course, which I've sort of, it's not a really long course. You can probably get it done in like a day, but like it is really interesting, and it goes into sort of the more the technicalities as well. It also goes into the studies as well. So like a lot of this it's not sort of, yeah, just contrived. So Annette in there actually shows the evidence of sort of these contextualizations actually working with persuadables. Something as simple as like changing a word from corporation, so like a drug corporation to a drug company, actually sort of turned over like the persuadables based from unfavorable to like favorable. So yeah, so it is really interesting. We'll send that across. How can we find out how to join that course? Oh yeah, Holly's done it already. Super fast. So yeah, that's the course. Yeah. And yeah, and it does go into sort of the metaphor subject is actually a really deep subject, and yeah, it's really easy to go down that wormhole. So, but it's extremely interesting as well. So conceptual metaphors. Yeah. I think the interesting thing is like how conceptual metaphors are based on sort of everyday sayings. So like the examples like time is money, life is a journey, and stuff like that. And then that like builds into our like our day-to-day conversation without us sort of even just second nature, just our normal conversation, even though practically it doesn't sort of represent reality, but it's just there. So Holly, is that your hand up? Oh, cool. Yeah, and then I think like what are the other courses, other workshops that we're going to have? We're going to have introduction to linguistics as well from Joe.
Yeah, so the foundations of linguistics from Joe and Adam will be in the last week of January on the Thursday, so the 28th, I think, is the date of that one. And yeah, if you haven't already checked out the Virtual Village, which is our new Animal Rebellion's new online training platform, it's just on our brand new website, so which is the same address as the old one. So yeah, I'd definitely check that out, because all the kind of talks and trainings and everything will be put up there.
Cool.